Well, what we learned from the OECD, well, the most tempting
Well, hello. Good afternoon. Uh, if I can. Well, now we can start. Hello and welcome to COP26 for Teaching for Climate Action in Schools Shaping the Future. This event is organized by the OECD, Education International, and UNESCO, who have together been gathering insights and expertise from teachers around the world on how they teach to empower young people to act and lead on climate. My name is Rodolfo Lassi. I am the Environment Director at the OECD. Welcome, everyone. It is my pleasure to moderate today's conversation with a cast of passionate and dedicated speakers who are here with me. And of course, they have a lot of experience across the education sector, and this event is recorded and live streamed. So we will have the opportunity to share some questions and answers with the audience here physically, but also virtually. Education's essential role in addressing climate change is too often overlooked, you know that. But schools have a key role to play for a sustainable future. Our future societies, our future habitats and behaviors, and ways of living, they all take root in the classrooms of today. Teachers have the capacity to be key agents of change in the fight against this climate change crisis. This is what led the OECD, UNESCO, and IEI to launch this campaign to gather teachers in initiatives and on teaching for climate action, because teachers from across the globe have been sharing how they empower their students for climate action through short videos and discussing key challenges on how to overcome with their peers this crisis, as I was explaining. This campaign is about capturing the tacit expertise of teachers when teaching for climate action and trying to provide more teachers and schools around the world with access to this expertise. It is also about empowering teachers and elevating their voice. Only teachers can share their expertise. You can find teachers' videos on the Global Teaching Insights platform that will be shared with you in the chat, and we will also get to watch some today together in these big screens, I suppose. Well, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Aldis Holst, who is Deputy Secretary General of Education International and a teacher by trade too. Well, your organization is the Global Federation of Education Unions, which represents 32.5 million teachers, amazing number of teachers, and of course, education support staff in 170 different countries. So welcome, all this. We are also joined here today by Stephanie Giannini, Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. The United Nations lead agency on education, we all know that. Before being appointed in 2018, Stefania was the Italian Minister of Education, and prior to that spent 8 years as director of the University for Forensics in Perugia. No, that's very nice. No, it's a very nice place. I'm also delighted to welcome Larry Flanagan, General Secretary of the Educational Institute of Scotland and President of ETUCE, the European Region of Education International. Larry has also had a very long career in the classroom itself and has always maintained a close connection with this space of education. Finally, in our panel, we will be joined by my colleague, Andreas Schleicher, Director for Education and Skills at the OECD, who unfortunately could not be present with us today, as you can see, but who will join us via video during this event. Nevertheless, this event is not only about our speakers today, but it is also about all the teachers around the world who have contributed to the Teachers for Climate Action campaign, from sharing insightful videos to joining our series of online conversations. Sadly, we cannot have all these teachers join us here in this space. We have some restrictions, of course, but can still draw upon their ideas and hear their voices by playing some short extracts of their videos throughout our discussion. Remember that you can watch all the videos in the Global Teaching Insight site, the platform that it was created for this specific task. I therefore like to start by hearing what some teachers have to say about teaching for climate action in their classrooms and in schools. So we will see a short video.
By teaching about an issue as multifaceted as climate change, we show students that problems and systems are interrelated. And to solve them effectively, it requires competencies across all disciplines.
We all know that our schools and classrooms are busy places, in particular in the past year, and sometimes struggle to figure out how to engage in the complex topics around sustainability. And while they want to include these global issues in their content, they're also conscious of ensuring that they reference and include the information appropriately, and not just as another thing to learn. I was conscious of that curriculum overload, but also the potential to develop something practical for teachers and schools, which would start where they were at.
Ces élèves ont tous participé, lorsqu'ils étaient en classe de 5e, à un enseignement pratique interdisciplinaire sur le thème de l'alimentation durable, dans lequel de nombreuses disciplines étaient impliquées et sont toujours impliquées, puisque ce projet est reconduit tous les ans. Parmi les disciplines, il y a les sciences de la vie et de la terre, géographie, français, maths, physique et arts plastiques. Dans le cadre de ce projet, le chef de cuisine de la restauration scolaire et l'infirmière scolaire interviennent aussi, ainsi que des personnes extérieures à l'établissement, ce qui en fait un projet vraiment très complet. À la fin du projet, les élèves proposent un menu par classe qui prend en compte différents critères, dont l'impact sur le climat. Et ce menu est ensuite réalisé par l'équipe de la restauration scolaire et servi à la cantine.
Our initiatives revolve around an overarching theme called sustainable living, whereby climate action, conservation of flora and fauna, and sustainability are infused into the curriculum. They are also sharing by the experts in the field, hands-on activities, competitions, and projects organized, providing knowledge, generating awareness, and allowing students to participate. Besides acquiring knowledge, students are more mindful about waste and generation of waste. They are enthusiastic to lead climate action activities in class, rally their family members and friends to do so, and even extend their activities during the school holidays.
Surgió el gran problema que estamos teniendo, y es que las mascarillas se están acumulando y no se sabe qué hacer con ellas. Investigamos, porque una de las cosas principales en mi módulo es que los niños aprendan a investigar y a buscar soluciones, y la composición de las mascarillas, como bien sabéis, es básicamente plástico. Esto había que acabarlo, estuvimos haciendo un montón de pruebas, por eso que algo muy importante que hay que transmitir a nuestros alumnos es que las cosas no se consiguen a la primera, todo lleva su tiempo, pero con el método científico y siendo rigurosos podemos encontrar soluciones. Y así lo hicimos.
An educator like me who is keen to teach environmental education and to influence or to empower students to take climate action, I say first start with finding like-minded educators and teachers around you or within your school community to help you pursue this together.
自然に対して何をしてどのように協力していくか子どもたちは見ています。数年後には大人になる子どもたち、力を合わせるかどうか一人一人が判断していきます。自然を身近な大切なものと捉え、働きかける積極性を持ち、いろいろな人と連携していくことができると自信を持つ子に育てることが私の考える気候変動教育です。
Okay, these short extracts showcase the potential of education. Aldis, I wonder if you could tell us what you see as the potential of education when it comes to the climate crisis, and whether you think the crucial role of teachers is fully understood.
No, it's not
No.
fully understood. That is the short answer. But to go back, I'm so inspired by these videos, and I would encourage everyone to go in and watch them. They really speak to my teacher's heart. And just some of the things that we heard here, they make it very clear that teaching about climate change is not just about knowledge. It's not transferring a knowledge. I think it was Nita that said it in the first video. It's about competence. And to get to the level of competence, you need to also know how to act on the knowledge that you receive. And you saw all these videos, they were doing. They were not just listening or reading, they were doing. And that is part of finding out what can I do with the knowledge, how can I act? And the beautiful one from Anna from Spain, where you're using the new kind of waste we now have during the pandemic, the face masks, and transforming it, recycling it, transforming it into something new. I'd love to be in that classroom with those students, the conversations they've had, the process they've had to come there, because it's not just making something, it's the whole learning process that goes on. So this shows us that you need to trust the professional autonomy of teachers and their knowledge to transform a curriculum that needs to be there, that mandates you to teach it, that they, in dialogue with students, are the experts of transforming this from a sentence in a curriculum to real-life learning and empowering of students on the ground, bottom-up. So yes, they are important, and I wish everyone would watch them, because you can't deny it when you've watched those videos.
Yes, indeed. Well, we are not simply talking about knowledge here. We also talk about the behaviors and skills, as you were explaining, Aldis. And I'd like to share here the thoughts of Andreas Schleiner, who is my colleague, and I feel this is an important point.
Well, what we learned from the OECD Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, is that students' environmental awareness often goes hand in hand with their depths of scientific understanding. We started to look at students' understanding of climate issues back in 2006. And at that time, fewer than 1 in 5 15-year-olds in the OECD area could properly explain issues around climate change or the environment. Just, 1 in 10 could, make use of evidence to compare and differentiate among competing scientific explanations. But what was actually most striking was that students with poorer knowledge and skills around environmental science, they often had an almost naive optimism that the climate challenge is going to go away sort of magically in the future. Stronger knowledge strengthened our trust in a common, shared and objective reality, and enables students to realistically assess the magnitude of the climate agenda ahead of us. That's why a solid, education and science is one of the best investments the society can make into the future of the planet. But it's not just about supporting a generation of climate literate citizens. It is also becoming increasingly clear that the future demands that we substantially change individual and also collective behavior. And that we find a better balance between situational values, I will do whatever a situation allows me to do, and sustainable values that help people see both the present and the future, and that generate trust, hope, social bonds. That's why cultivating healthy, green mindsets and also ways of living very early on is so important. We must focus on fostering that student agency. As we saw in the video with Benny and Anna just now, in which students recycle waste, and the classrooms can be places where students don't just, absorb knowledge around, climate change, but they can become spaces that transform how students live and interact with those issues. And keep in mind that the demands on education will keep evolving. Let's hope that today's school graduates will aim for green jobs to build the technologies that will drive down carbon dioxide emissions. And let's hope that today's children in kindergarten will grow up in a world with electric cars and carbon capture technologies. And by the time these kindergarten children are adults, we should have reached net zero. But assuming we do, these children will face entirely new challenges. Throughout their lives, they'll need to adapt to extreme weather conditions and natural events, and they need the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes and values to be ready for that. The point is, we need to educate students for their future, not our past.
Well, thank you, Andreas. And in our conversation on teaching, 80% of attendees felt that teaching for climate action is important for all subjects and teachers. There are some great examples that you can see in our Global Teaching Insights platform. And we are now sharing the website that you can see perhaps in the chat. If not, later we can provide more information about this platform. But Stefania, why do we need to further support these interdisciplinary and whole school approaches? And furthermore, what do schools need to drive this further?
Good afternoon, first of all. Great to see you and to be here in person. I think we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And great to have also Andreas connected and leveraging technology in order to, valorize this movement we are building, because it's about that. This is the second side event at COP26, which is focusing on the importance of education, the importance now of teaching and teachers in order to make the change, the big change, the dramatic change we need possible. And I think the whole school approach that UNESCO is promoting is very much part of the solution. As these teachers, I join Haldis in, feeling really very much touched by their live, telling us what they are doing, not only what they are teaching about, are really very much important for us to understand that it's not climate education, climate literacy, a nice to have, in addition to all the other topics that schools and teachers in the school are teaching. And it's not about simply the knowledge that children must have, but it's a whole process to run. And it starts with content, of course, pedagogies, and climate education, we do believe, must be included as a core part of the curriculum. We have some good news and some bad news from the survey that UNESCO just released this week. Out of 100 countries, almost half of them don't include education for climate in their curriculum. So there is a huge work to do. On the other side, from the teacher's perspective, you already discussed with colleagues before, it's very nice to see, it's very important to see that 90% of teachers we surveyed say, yes, it's crucial, it's essential to teach, to include climate education and these topics in the school programs. However, only 20% feel and feel comfortable and ready to go when it's about teaching and transmitting to children the way they must have to their own contribution to change to address climate change. And this is about behaviors. It's not about simply transmission of knowledge. So teachers are critical. Some keywords I remember from Valerie maybe from Ireland: respect, care. This is the century where care is the key word. We have to see that taking care is the title of what we are discussing here in this COP26, and is the title of our joint program about education for sustainable development. And we see teachers are very much on top of that. Then, of course, it's not only about that. It's not only promoting a roadmap globally. It's not only giving guidance to governments, which is an important part of the job you are doing as international organization and UNESCO, leading this process. But it's very much about teachers giving the tools, starting with the pre-service teaching and in-service training. It's about organizing the school process, the schooling in a different way. It has to do with facilities. It has to do with the governance of the school. It has to do with involving communities and having an open school in addressing these topics. So it's about managing complexity, but of course what we are discussing here is a big change, which has to do, let me conclude this first round, recalling the chain of values that Education for Sustainable Development is bringing out. Knowledge, awareness, action. And this is about changing behaviors. Changing behaviors is not simply and crucially a collective responsibility, it's also an individual different approach to the small things that every day we are doing. And about that, of course, a good teacher, a well-prepared teacher in the classroom is a very, very first important step. So we are very happy to join and be in partner in crime with Education International and OECD about that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Stefania. One thing that is emerging here is the role of collaboration. I'd love to hear from you, Larry. You have worked very closely with a range of communities of teachers. What does professional collaboration around climate education look like for you?
I think, well, firstly, colleagues, welcome to Glasgow, my home city. The school I taught in is a short walk from here, so this is a very real connection with the classroom. I think collaboration is critical to how we actually engage young people nowadays. And not just in climate education, but across all curriculum subjects. And it is a big change. In 1979, when I became a teacher, you walked into your classroom, you closed the door, and you were on your own. And you only saw colleagues at the breaks. Now the pattern has changed. We collaborate because we know that this is more effective in nurturing young people and having a whole school approach. And I think in terms of climate education, it's perhaps even more critical. And just to build on the point, that what we don't want is one or two people who are active on climate education. We have in Scottish schools often what's called a climate champion. So a kind of designated teacher who takes the lead. But we don't need individual superheroes. We need all teachers to be engaged so that climate education is not 1 hour a week. We're doing climate education, but actually all the time in the classroom, all the subjects we have embedded. And young people see the connection. They see the connection between science and home economics. They see the connection between English and geography. And I think collaborative practice It's what enables that joining up, that connection. And all of that means that young people develop the inquisitiveness, they develop the interrogation skills, and they can arrive at their own conclusions because we have empowered them to think through the topic, and collaboration, I think, is the key to that.
Thank you very much, Larry. Yes, it's a cross-cutting topic, and we have to have a comprehensive view of the topic. Otherwise, we will not be able to understand what's going on in the planet. Okay, I think it is time to hear from the audience. We are asking you out to tell us in the chat, if you were a world leader, how would you change education to empower climate action? That is a question. But I'd like to stay with this theme of the future, and where we go now, if we are remained, how teaching and learning can be future ready. What are the concrete next steps that education ministers should consider in your opinion? I'm going to invite you to hear from Andreas Schleicher, who can't join us directly, but who I spoke to previously. So, can you put Andreas' video, please?
Well, you know, the most tempting thing for ministers to do is to redesign and adjust the school curriculum, because that's the easiest thing to do. And of course, it's very important. But according to PISA, 9 out of 10 school leaders say that climate change is already covered in their curriculum. And when we surveyed students, also here, the vast majority of students told us how important and urgent the climate agenda is for them. The real challenge is that many students feel they can't do anything about this. Our school systems do a good job in building student awareness, but they often fail when it comes to helping students develop their agency through which they can, mobilize their cognitive, social, emotional resources to take action. So I would start at the other end, the learning experiences, the learning environments, the classroom practices. The most important thing is often not to push a new curriculum top-down into schools, but to start with finding the best practices in today's classrooms and see how to leverage and scale them to make them systemic across schools, across school systems. And this campaign here shows so many really inspiring classrooms. What policy can do is to build a supportive ecosystem around them, like our OECD Global Teaching Insights initiative does. We need environments where teachers can safely, effectively, and collaboratively innovate pedagogy. Teaching for climate action must be agile and evolving, and that relies on a strong teaching profession that can grow and develop always in step with rapidly changing demands. And it's equally important to codify this expertise as it surfaces, to build well-organized, teacher-led repositories of works where teachers can find ideas and inspiration. So back to your question of what ministers can do. Well, to achieve transformative change, don't ask yourself how many of your staff support your new curriculum. Ask yourself how well your teachers and school leaders can collaborate around innovative and effective classroom practice. What matters is to be transparent with teachers and school leaders about where change in education is heading and what that actually means for them. To be acutely aware how organizational policies and practices can either facilitate or inhibit that transformation. To tackle the institutional structures that are too often built around the interests and habits of adults rather than those of learners. And to use power and influence to build alliances and coalitions that are needed to help, rules become good practice and good practice to become culture. I know none of this is easy and none of this will be done overnight, but real change often happens in deep crisis. So let's use this moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andreas, for those insights and joining us remotely. Let me turn to you, Stefania, with the same question. What do you see as the next concrete steps for the education ministers looking to spur action? You have the experience.
Yeah. I have the experience. I can tell you something about, but I do agree with Andreas about, looking at this process as a step by step. So first step, and most importantly, what we are keeping in the global roadmap, greening curriculum, so to say. So we have to call governments, not only ministers of education, I underscore this point, governments, to take their own ownership, their own responsibility to include climate education and education for sustainable development at the core of their programs. Since the very, very first step, the early childhood to university level. I already mentioned numbers we had from this last recently released survey. There is a lot of work to do about that. Andrea said it's the easiest step. I mean, it's almost right. I mean, it's not so easy to change curriculum, I can tell you, but you can do that. It's maybe something that ministers of education can start to design within their ministries. The second, more complex but very much needed step, in my opinion, is greening schools. I mean, this all school approach is about that. It's about changing the learning environment. It's about involving communities. It's about changing the governance of schools. And this is a more complicated discussion. It's possible to do, but it requires a permanent strategic dialogue, first of all, between the two critical ministries involved in on this topic, education and environment. That's why at this COP at 4 p.m. we'll have the very first meeting of Ministers of Education and Ministers of Environment convened by UNESCO, co-organized with the UK presidency of COP26 and the Italian presidency of G20 and partner in this COP. And they will commit to make this job together. Because I can tell you that if you don't have a joint action on this issue, I mean, it will be simply 2 hours more in the school schedule, and it's not enough. Then the last point, it's about mobilizing funds and political will on this issue. Let me say in a very simple way, I think we'll get it when in the plenary of COP20 something, 27 or maybe later, I don't know, we'll have education for sustainable development as a main topic. And when we'll hear from leaders of the world to address climate change through education, in education. It didn't happen, I suppose. I heard some of the main speeches in the plenary, and I think that nobody mentioned education. So education for climate change is not a side event topic, and we are very happy to organize side events on that. But once we'll have education as part of the solution to address climate change in a very structural way, I think we can say, well, the last step will be done, and we are very much keen to promote this big change needed.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I remember in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 that one of the conclusions of that summit was to teach young girls how the environment works, to give them the freedom to know, to understand, and to act. That was one of the conclusions in Rio de Janeiro. It is true that we have to have some conclusions or some recommendations or some really resolutions about the climate education here.
So back to the future to have
of course, of course, we have to. Now let me turn to Aldis, because you came here with the voices of educators, with the experience from educators, and also the feelings from educators, so, and demands. What are the next steps for you that are priority steps?
Well, in many ways, the next steps for us are the same as Andreas has talked about and Stefania has talked about, because we first need the political commitment. We need the pledge from governments, and that has to be real. It can't just be a pledge that you do while you're at a meeting and then you go home and forget about it. And then, of course, the next step is, if you haven't started on it, you have to start on mobilizing the experts on curriculum to revise your curriculum. And I think I agree with Andreas that in comparison, that's the easy part, because that can be done when the go-ahead has been given. But nothing is going to happen until you take the third step. And that is about the practitioners, those that are actually going to put this reform into life in the classroom. And that's where we most often go wrong on all informs. It's about focusing on implementation, implementation, implementation. And implementation here is about the teachers. So you need to make sure that your teachers are able to implement. All the teachers. Here I very much agree with Larry. Yes, you can train specialized teachers that can be sort of the go-to or a mentor or something like that, but it's never going to be a cross-cutting subject or transversal if you don't make sure that you educate all teachers, because it is a way of thinking, it is a way of acting, it underlies all the other subjects that you're going to teach. So you have to reform your teacher training programs. And you have to have a massive professional development program for those that already are in practice. But you can't do this top-down either. So my major point is that you have to do this in cooperation with those that you're going to train, with the teachers and with their unions. Do it in dialogue. They actually have a lot to bring to the table. Look at the videos. They're not incompetent. They know what they're talking about, and they can bring something to the table to revise it.
Yeah, indeed. Larry, do you have the last participation here?
Thank you. And I was really intrigued by your question, if you were a world leader. So I don't know what's in the chat, and I'm not a world leader, but if I was, I would trust teachers. I would put teachers in charge, because I think then the practitioners would realise the ambition around climate education. And if we wanted to look at more practical steps, then I think we have to ensure that climate education is embedded in our curriculum structures, so there is a green light there for practitioners in terms of taking this agenda forward. I think we have to invest in teachers so that they have the knowledge and skills to empower young people. In Scotland, most teachers have degree qualifications and then a postgraduate qualification. But I'll guarantee you, the degree content of their courses says very little about climate education. So let's not assume that teachers have all of the knowledge. We have to enable that knowledge to be gained in order for it to impact in the classroom. And then my last point is to reiterate my first point. We have to empower teachers. We have to give them agency so that they can then give young people the same agency and empowerment, develop the skills that are needed to go forward. And I think if we can do that, if we look at our curriculum, if we invest in our teachers, and if we give teacher agency a free rein, then we are looking at a brighter future.
Indeed, yes. Well, now it is time to open the floor to the audience. Yes, please. Do you have a question? I can take one question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shantanu. I come from India, and I represent the Brahma Kumaris Spiritual University. My question is to Stefania especially. I like the word you said, care is the word for the century. With the growing climate anxiety amongst young people, old people, everyone, is there a way that you see to incorporate well-being, to incorporate the wisdom and power of indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge into the curriculum? Because it has been always subsided. And the world is now coming back to that point where they are starting recognizing that it is important. Because if it is empty inside, no matter how much knowledge you gain from your books, it doesn't help. We have been having the knowledge, the science, the money, the power, but still we couldn't move because there wasn't will, which comes from ethics. which comes from values. So do you think you have a plan to incorporate such programs in the education system that helps to build and prepare people to fight and become independent towards anxiety and issues like that?
We have enough time to take another question, and later the answers from the panel.
Thank you. My name is Lucy Alderslow. I'm a permaculture educator and representing children in permaculture. I also really liked the care statement there. Care is the key word this century. My book that I wrote is Earth Care, People Care, and Fair Share in Education. Yeah. So I was really heartened by that. I would redesign the whole education system around earth care at its heart, and keeping like nature connection embedded in everything that we're doing. With the younger children talking about climate change like under 10 is too much. It's too abstract, it's too difficult, but they can understand to love a squirrel or a tree. And starting with that and the ethics, you know, that love and that care is essential. So grounds, in my ideal world, would be full of biodiversity, rather than that small nature garden in the corner. Buildings would demonstrate what a low carbon environment is. So every school would have renewable energy generation that the children would be reading and monitoring all the time. The pedagogy is really essential as well, and is about valuing nature at its core. Of course, the curriculum as well, which you've already talked about, and educating all teachers. And I'm working with teachers at the moment, and as you say, they are experts in their field. In Scotland, it's coming to a question.
Please.
In Scotland, we have a unique opportunity at the moment, because we're merging the Scottish Qualifications Authority. And we could reimagine how young people spend their final years in school. At the moment, there is such a focus on individualism, on competition, on each child getting the qualification that will get them into university better than their colleagues, their classmates, their friends. And this is, this is the question, is how do we accredit cooperation and earth care through the reimagining of the SQA?
It is evident that we have teachers here because they explain the background of their questions. Please, the reaction from the panelists. Stefania?
So thank you. Thanks for recalling this word. I really care so much by definition. I mean, playing on words. And well, yes, I do believe it's possible. I joined UNESCO, by the way, because of that, because it's the organization that since the establishment 75 years ago, actually this year, we are celebrating the anniversary next week in Paris, is about that. It's about making cultural diversity as the very, very core principle to implement all the agenda. And then, of course, there are different steps in history. So it's about a tireless effort of advocacy on this perspective. It's about promoting and discussing with member states, I mean governments, leaders, but not only in a top-down approach. You mentioned indigenous knowledge. I mean, at UNESCO, I want to refer to a topic I was dealing with before taking this position in my career as a linguist. The notion of language as a human right and the notion of linguistic diversity as an important tool to also about learning and teaching, but generally speaking, is a UNESCO achievement, so to say, in the global debate. So as as there is a movement around these values. Of course, I mentioned UNESCO leading this platform, this agenda, but with all partners. No, we are here today, and we are very much keen to make things happen on the ground. I think it's possible. I also see, honestly, some obstacles, for sure. I already mentioned before, I mean, it's a bit surprising that, as you recall, Rodolfo, in 1992, the conclusion of Rio Summit was about, putting teaching education and education at the very core, and in Glasgow, I mean, we are developing a nice conversation, and we are doing things on education, but still the plenary was focusing on something else. So I think there is a lot of work to do still. And then the second question was about, sorry,
I'll try to address some of it, and I'm sure Larry can also comment on it. If I may say two words about Indigenous peoples, I'm so happy that you raised it, because I think we now have a golden opportunity. And if we look at the positives, there are so many Indigenous peoples around the world that have been told that their knowledge isn't valuable, and that have not had it integrated in the education of their children. Now is the time that we actually can say that they are the experts and tap into that knowledge. And every country that's so lucky that they have Indigenous peoples and communities have that opportunity to tap into it bottom up, and I really hope they do. Thank you for raising it, very important. I cannot comment on Scotland. I'll let Larry do that. But I think you've made very many points on approaching. And yes, maybe someplace you need to totally reform your schools and systems, but there are also good practices to build on that are already there. I've myself taught in a school where we had an outdoor classroom every week, 1 day a week. We were outdoors all day. Early childhood institutions that spend 90% of their time outdoors. And it's about letting children experience the world and planet they're living on, and that's how they build knowledge from the reality around them. So I think there does also exist good practice. I don't know if there's any on the Insights videos, but maybe we should have some of them.
Yeah, thank you. I think two really good questions. So on the values issue, so not just looking at Indigenous people, but I think all education systems have to be based upon values. And here in Scotland, I'm a registered teacher, and my professional standards begin not with reference to my competency, but to the values that as a teacher I subscribe to. And learning for sustainability is profiled there. So I think values are absolutely critical for any education system. And on the specifics of Scotland, just to broaden out the answer, one of the things we learned during the pandemic was the important role of outdoor education, teaching in the outdoors. And I think Scotland has much to learn there. We have a natural landscape for doing it. But if you look at the Scandinavian countries, they are much further down that road. So I think we do need to look at how we think beyond the classroom in terms of the learning environment of young people, because that does inculcate, a sense of nature, a sense of wonder, a sense of inquiry. And on your last point, I'll not deal specifically with the SQA because nobody will know what we're talking about. But you made the point about the upper end of secondary school being about competition, and it kind of echoes the values point. We need to have, we need to have cooperation rather than competition. We need to have collegiality rather than conflict, and all of that is about how we nurture the young citizens that we want our teenagers to be, and education cannot simply be about qualifications for university. It has to have a much broader agenda, and climate education and the values that young people, in Glasgow today there are thousands of young people marching to the city centre demonstrating that they care passionately about this, that they have a sense of value, and I think it's our duty as educators to nurture that in the best way possible for a better future.
Thank you very much, Larry. Well, we have to conclude. And if you are a teacher or school leader, we invite you really to share with us your initiatives and perhaps also your experiences. You can send us an email, you can send us a video, and we have this Global Teaching Insights platform. I'm seeing one of the teachers here raising their hand insistently. Let me go with him and ask you what is perhaps your question to, your answer, not your question, to these questions that I would like to pose to for all of you here and in the platform. What can you do to support teachers and schools in teaching for climate action and ultimately for a future and better future? If you can give us a quick answer, perhaps you can stimulate others to give us some answers in the platform.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Javed Giannini. I'm from Pakistan. So I'm a social scientist actually, and I work with the school children, the deprived, the poorest of the poor. The first thing I would say, according to that, we need to treat the teacher, the student, and the parents heart of this. Okay, one thing is that, and the second thing is, we already discussed. If knowledge is there, and if awareness is not there created for these main stakeholders, so you are going to get nothing. The last thing is I would touch with the action planning. So one thing is the commitment you see from the government, single national curricula, integrated the environmental issues and the motivation for the students and the teachers and all the stakeholders and the parents. And the second thing, which the schools and the public sector and private sector can do, within their yearly planning. You see the co-curricular activities, which the exposure that the students can learn more and take it to the communities, to their parents, and across to create more awareness. So within the yearly activities, you can embed a lot of things, taking environment as a key, okay, and creating. And one thing which I would see, this faith. Faith is a big incentive. If we bring in and integrate faith, different faiths, if you study all the faith, they see environment at the top. Only in Islam you see, they say, in Islam only they say 50% of the religion is environment, is, the cleanliness, is to protect yourself and others. Thank you.
No, thank you. There is another intervention here. We have 1 minute, in less than 1 minute, please,
okay,
because we need to conclude.
No problems. So I help teachers. I come from the Climate Fresk NGO.
Oh, yes, I know you.
And we help teachers by providing them with a very accessible, scalable tool to teach climate change in schools, in universities, and I've personally trained teachers. They absolutely love this tool, and it's really, really accessible. It's based on IPCC reports. We've already reached over 240,000 people all over the world. The workshop, the game, is translated into 35 languages, and we're really looking to reach the whole world. And I know that this really works with teachers. The teachers absolutely love it. So I invite you to come and discover the Climate Fresk.
And thank you for coming here. Well, share your experience, your expertise with your peers, because if there is one thing that stands out today, is that education has an enormous role to play beyond COP26, 27, 28. So it is our duty to do that. But fulfilling this potential relies on the work of all of us, really. That means teachers around the world, but also the school leaders, support staff and teacher educators that support them, the organizations and partners that seek to empower and support them, and the communities, the parents, like one of our colleagues here said,
which can orientate themselves around school and its work. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your feelings. And well, we are expecting a very good outcomes from COP26, and education must be part of them. Thank you. Bye-bye.
think so. Can you all hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Awesome. Hi, my name's Kathleen Rogers. I'm president of EarthDay.org, the organization that started in 1970 with the first Earth Day that brought 20 million people out onto the streets. And we developed a global set of environmental laws, thanks to many of you. We're here at this important COP event after a long hiatus because of COVID and what it's done to our economy and our people is extraordinary. But we're here with a message of hope thanks to the group in this room. I am incredibly honored to have at our pavilion such incredible people, the ministers of multiple African countries and the youth representatives. I'm going to turn it over to our incredible staff member, Jean Bertrand, to introduce everyone, and we welcome you for this hastily put together event, but agreed because we have such honorable people in this room, and I'm incredibly pleased to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you, distinguished teleguest. We, as young people from Africa, we're very pleased. It's an honor. It's the first time, so we consider it a historic event. So now, please allow me to introduce our panelists that we have today. And I think we have such, you can tell that the panelists that we have, or the group of panelists that we have, they are really, really important guests. So just bear with me and join me as I welcome. We have Honorable Lawrence Songa Viaka from the Ministry of Water and Environment, Uganda. Join me in welcoming the Honorable Minister. We also have Mr. Kariwoko Tobiko, the Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Kenya. We have my also proud minister from Zimbabwe, the Honorable Minister Ngobizita Mangaliso Ndlovu, from the Ministry of Environment, Climate, Tourism and Hospitality Industry in Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us, Honorable Minister. And then we also have youth panelists that we have. We have one of our own Earth Day youth from Africa, Brenda Mwale from Malawi, who is joining us. And then we have also Elizabeth Kulukulu Machache, who's also my colleague. We work very, very closely with African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. Elizabeth? Okay, that said, because of the tight schedule, I know we're all busy. A lot of things are going on right now. I'm not taking anything from this event, being important as it is. Allow us to delve, into the discussion, the order of today, so that we can have a just and brief conversation that will take our planet to the next level. So without wasting much of your time, I'm very glad, Honorable Ministers, that you are here. So as probably requested from the African youth, we would like to have a dialogue with you regarding, issues that are concerning young people engaging, given that our continent has the largest, demography of young people, and we intend to be working hand in hand. We have felt the support, but we want to take it to the next level. So I'll start with you, Honorable Minister Lawrence. I think the first question that I'll pose to you, and I'm sure part of my young people here want to hear, is probably how involved are the youth in national programs, projects, climate change, and their rights? Are they rights holders or participants? Are young people really being activated to address externalities of climate change? So this is a mouthful, I know, but then it's something that young people really want to know as we engage in the dialogues and conversations going forward. So maybe if you can have that one.
Thank you very much. My name is B. Kaloren Songa. I'm actually a member of Parliament in Uganda, but I chair the Climate Change Committee in Parliament of Uganda. And I have come here with my colleagues. They can raise their hands. These are honorable members of Parliament from Uganda. As far as climate change is concerned, we know very well that this climate change is affecting everybody. But the degree to which people are suffering vary from one person to another. And women and children and young people are the most vulnerable. As a result of this, in Uganda, we have created the environment of interaction with all stakeholders, government, civil society, private sector, academia. And with the civil society, there are many youth, young people, civil society organizations that we are working with. Recently, we completed the climate change law. Now we have a climate change act in Uganda, and the youth was seriously involved. So we are really involving this youth, and we are also encouraging the young people to do environmental entrepreneurship, especially the green jobs. And this will help so that the youth are not observers, but they become participants in addressing climate change issues in Uganda. And you are aware that we have to conserve the natural resources. All our economies, the one of Uganda, is natural resource based, and the population is growing. As a result of this, we need to conserve, we need to wisely use these natural resources for our development in a cost-benefit analysis, but also leave more for the bigger population. And that population will be under the management of these current young people. So that involvement is very important, but also skilling this youth so that they can have some entrepreneurship, especially in line with the green jobs, will be very, very key. But also in schools, we have in the law integrated climate change education and research right from primary up to universities in the current law. So we want to see that the young people are involved, because it is very difficult to correct an older person. But if we start early, these young people will grow, the children, the young people will grow with this idea of addressing climate change. That's what we are doing in Uganda. And we call upon all stakeholders, development partners who are willing to support these young people, whether in the environmental entrepreneurship or some initiatives at the local, national level, or even regional level, to come in so that they can guide the efforts to address climate change in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Profound indeed. Seems like there's a lot happening in Uganda. I always work with my colleague Derek, and he's always talking about the amazing work that you're doing. But it's good to hear the work that you're doing. I feel bad imposing this question again to our Honorable Minister, given that I work with him nearly almost every day. But of course, it's good to hear what events, or to also share with other young people so that they get inspired and also engaged in the ultimate work that we are doing. You know, our young people also, young Africans, being activated to address climate externality, externalities of climate change. So maybe you can also talk about the plans that we have in pipeline to upscale such initiatives. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, for the invitation for Zimbabwe to be part of this very important platform. And thanking you for a very important question. I have tried to look around, and I am seeing that it is truly composed mainly of young people. I've recently just transitioned from the tech youth. So we always say that anything intended for young people without young people is not for young people. So I'm happy that young people are here and actively participating in such important discussions. So from Zimbabwe, I want to acknowledge that we have come a long way. And I remember when we were in COP25 in Madrid, meeting young people and discussing a way in which we can mainstream young people in climate change issues. And I must say, in the last 2 years, despite the limitations of COVID, I have seen a massive increase in the involvement of young people in climate change programs. We submitted our NDCs with increased ambition, and I'm proud to say that young people played a pivotal role in formulating a youth position paper, which position paper came from massive wide consultations by young people consulting their young counterparts across the country, urban, rural areas. When you talk of externalities of climate change, we are looking at how climate change is affecting the young people. Young people in Zimbabwe, mainly in rural areas, depend on agriculture for livelihoods. We have seen increased uncertainties in rainfall patterns, and we are a rain-dependent country in terms of agriculture. So who is then bearing this burden? It is the young person. It is very important, therefore, that in policy formulation, young people take center stage. And we have, as the ministry, been working closely with young people, facilitating capacitation, facilitating skills development, facilitating dialogue among young people so that they are heavily involved. I must also highlight that the position paper that young people came up with quite clearly speaks to the ambitions of young people, what government ought to play and what they ought to play, because they are not there just to beg. They are there, they want to participate, they want to be recognized. And we have been working closely with them in that regard. And going forward again, issues of making sure that they access finance to implement their projects is part of what we will be working on. And I'm happy that as I see these young people, they are the ones that are leading in the dialogue that includes young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much. I think that's a mouthful from Zimbabwe as well. So I'll move on to you, the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Tobiko. I'm sorry, I hope I got that correct. You know, with pronunciation, of course, we are one home, but then at times we get to differ in terms of, you know, how we pronounce our language. We are a very, very huge continent. Anyways, with you, Honorable Minister, I will take it forward, given that, you know, proceeding from this COP26, we are going forward to COP27 and Africa. We normally say best lessons learned from Africa when we talk about conservation and climate action, because we haven't been, you know, the highest polluters. We have been more on the receiving end of the impacts. What are is Africa ready for COP27, and are we building momentum for COP27, and what's going to be our position as Africa, maybe?
Well, thank you very much. Just before I speak about COP27, why don't we speak about this COP? Because the outcome of this COP very much will depend and will determine the trajectory that we will take going forward to COP27. And firstly, let me ask my colleagues, the team of negotiators, because the youth are not just to be seen to populate delegations. They're not numbers. They're not statistics. They're thinkers. They're intellectuals. They're experts. And I have in my delegation, in the team of negotiators, 7 of them, some of them are here, who are leading in the various negotiation streams. And may I ask them just to stand up so that they can be seen? Some of the Kenyan delegation youth. Now, please be seated. This is not just to say that delegations are not important. And they are here by right. Okay? And I can tell you, in the streams they have been participating, they bring new ideas. They challenge the old thinking. And that is what we require. That's the first point. The second point is here. Kenya has a population, the youth population of 75% below 35, 75%. That tells you how massive, a powerhouse. This is a group that has the technology. This is a group that has the numbers. This is a group that has ideas. They are citizens of the world. They don't care about which tribe you belong in. Not at all. We call them the digital warriors. So you harness them, they produce positive results, right? Now, thirdly, our president, as you know, was in 2018 and 2019 appointed as the UN champion on youth agenda for good reason, because Kenya has mainstreamed the participation, decision-making of youth in development and more so in environmental and climate change action. 7 of our deputy ministers, deputy ministers, fall within the bracket of what we call youth in Kenya. Not to mention the numbers of those who head and members of parastatals. So in terms of leadership, this is not just about ceremony, formality. It is have the youth at the center. They have the largest stake in this. Now, moving to COP27. COP27 is already settled, well, we hope, because they are still that it will be in Africa. It will be the African COP, to be hosted by Egypt. But we are having serious challenges here in the COP26. The first item on the agenda that was dropped from the agenda, and there's still a fight about it, is to drop the issue of the special needs and circumstances for Africa. That's the first agenda that has been dropped. And we are asking our colleagues, and it's still now at the ministerial negotiation, we're asking them that how do you proceed to Africa in COP20 next year if in this COP you have dropped the African special needs agenda? Now, the youth, without the youth, there is no future. I mean, we keep on always saying leaders of tomorrow. They are not leaders of tomorrow. They are leaders of now. And the youth, please don't wait for us to hand over the mantle to you. Take it, because we ourselves have messed up. There is a saying, actually it's true, that we do not borrow, we have not inherited the world from our forefathers. We have borrowed it from our children. We have messed it up. Take it up, run with it. It is your future, not ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I feel so empowered right now. He has just told me to do whatever it takes. And I hope we're all hearing this to all the ministers across the continent, even globally, because we're having some youth from other parts, of the world that are inactive and having it a hard time to participate. I feel like at times Africa is more engaged. But I really acknowledge, such remarks. They empower us as young people. And also young people, let's not wait for them to, to knock by our doors, but we also go to them. This is a challenge for us, to approach them with the much needed action. So before I hand over to Jabril, to also engage our two young amazing ladies here in the discussion, I think I have because you talked about the issue to do with, downstreaming the knowledge and also being at the pivot or at the center of engagement. But then that is a process whereby you have to capacitate, you have to educate so that they know how to be involved in that aspect, given that climate change is a giant that has fallen on us. No one was prepared for it, so there is need for engagement. So just, back to you, Honorable Minister, as we also, try to have the young people come into the discussion as well. What, extent is the government prioritizing in climate education and the plans post, this COP26? I've been told not to engage much about post COP26, but now in terms of engagement, how can we capacitate these young people in terms of climate education?
Before even we talk about our government, this COP26 should prioritize the agenda for the young people. In Warsaw, I made a remark, even in Marrakech, that if the trend continues, where they keep dropping our priorities, as the G77 and China, one day we shall organize our own COP in Africa. I don't know whether that is the reason why they are coming to Africa, but we need the agenda of the young people put on top. But of course, in our country, we give priority to this so that the young people who are the leaders of now will be able to shape the development pathway of the country. As a result of this, Uganda has really given that position very strongly, and over 40% of the population is actually young people. Therefore, as Uganda, we really see that after this COP, the resolutions made here should really focus to see that efforts put in place, initiatives put in place by the young people are supported with resources, with technology, with capacity building. I think that will be very important. After all, I've already said in the law we have integrated climate change education and research. And most of these people, whether in the high school or universities, are young people who are doing research. That can help a lot to create awareness so that we can be at par to the different audiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, I think, Honorable Minister, you can also add on to that. In terms of, you know, we talk of it as, you know, just transition, the process whereby we are transforming our way of livelihood. But how best can we get young people capacitated to be, you know, active change makers in this climate, you know, action discourse that we embark on right now?
Thank you so much. The reality is that Africa, as we are standing here, we are disproportionately affected by this. It's a problem we did not create. It's a problem that we face either way. And my colleagues have highlighted the demographics in Africa. By 2050, our populations will have almost doubled. When you look at the current youth proportion, in most countries it's 60% and upwards. What does this tell you? If we are talking of transitioning, it means there will be structural changes in how economies are structured. It means there will be changes in employment. It means that we need to start talking of the jobs of the future. And this affects young people. If young people are not at the front table, who will then discuss on their behalf? That's why it is very important, and I'm happy that from what I'm hearing, African governments are already mainstreaming youth initiatives. They are already putting youths at the forefront. They are not just participants, they are right holders, as it were. When we look at the Zimbabwean situation, for starters, we want to make sure that when we implement our development trajectories for our national development strategy, which runs for 5 years, climate is critical, it is central, it is mainstreamed, and young people are at the center of that. We have universities in all our provinces. We have developed curriculum that universities are now using to make sure that climate change is part of the education processes. A lot more still needs to be done. Africa needs to rise to the occasion. Africa cannot afford to come here and emerge as if the world needs them. The world needs Africa. We should not come here as if we are begging to be on the table. Look at the emissions ratios that are there globally. We are the sinks of the world. They should be coming to us to acknowledge what we are doing right and supporting what we are doing so that we continue to scale up those activities. And these have to cascade to young people. They are the ones who will run with technologies, with innovation, with smart solutions, smart agriculture, as it were. So I believe that as a country, we have begun that process of making sure that we give young people the platform, we give young people the room to show their innovation. All our universities now, they have innovation hubs. In the last 24 months, we have patented more than 72 innovations. And this speaks to the youth dividend. This speaks to the potential of young people if we give them the platform. And I believe that we will not be able to achieve our climate goals unless they are led by young people.
Okay, thank you so much. We are running out of time, but yes, Honorable Minister, how can we ride on this climate education initiative to make sure that we get
climate education, climate learning, environmental for sustainable development, public awareness are absolutely important. You cannot have behavioral change individually, household, and collectively unless there is awareness. Kenya has integrated climate change education and awareness into our school curriculum. Secondly, we have produced special documents, including some of them that we have here. We will put them for those who may wish to have copies about them, others that you can access digitally. Very, very important to have these instruments, the Climate Change Learning National Strategy, the Youth Climate Action Strategy, Education for Sustainable Development, and so on and so on. So this education is absolutely important. In terms of empowerment, that should be the last point. In law, in our constitution, in our law, 30% of the entire public procurement is reserved for women, youth, and those under disability. So the youth have, in terms of participation in public procurement, are preserved. Their role is preserved. And we have a national youth enterprise fund that provides startup capital as in terms of grants for the youth who are starting in those. And we must empower the youth because they have the skills, they have the passion, they have the knowledge, but they need support. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Honorable Ministers, for sharing this. This is quite interactive and eye-opening. Having you, at our disposal as young people, we feel very proud. Now we have something, to leverage on as we go back home and implement our project. So I'll introduce Jabril so that he can just get our young people also to share with you, so that you see the ambition that is within them and they can share what they are also working on or what their ambitions are.
Thank you so much, Jean Paul. My name is Jabri Ibrahim, and I work for the UN Climate Champions, and I'm from Kenya. CS nimeshukuru kuona habari yako. So I'm just going to, I think the beauty of COP26 and convenings like this is that you can run into your minister just in the hallway, and you can you can grab them and you can tell them, we have youth here, you should come. And we've gotten 3 countries, and so I'm really happy to see we have 3 countries represented here. We are going to, and I'm just going to also introduce our 2 youth speakers. Brenda here is from Malawi, and this morning she presented the Global Youth Statement to the head of delegation, and Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC. And at the end, we have Elizabeth Gulugulu, who is one of the executive board members of the Africa Youth Initiative on Climate Change, AYIC, which we all know about. And I also want to just say that youth should hold each other accountable as well. So I'm also going to ask them questions. And the last thing I want to say is the former AU Youth Envoy used to speak about this concept called intergenerational co-leadership. Because of how our demographic in our countries are, it's so skewed, 80% are youth, but more leaders are not technically youth. So, and now that we have a new AU Youth Envoy, we hope will be heard more on a continental level. Now, I just want to pass now to Elizabeth Gulugulu and ask your question. So, Liz, are you ready? So, on the road to COP27, what role do you think African youth should play, and what do you think they should advocate for at COP27? I know we have agenda items for COP26, so if you also want to speak about those, please do. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the platform, and thank you to the ministers who accepted our invitations. So, right, COP27. It's always about climate finance. Accessing climate finance as young people, it has always been a problem. Most of the times we have climate finance available, but it's not youth-friendly. We face a lot of barriers as young people. If we are talking about meaningful youth engagement, it's not only about having the resources available, but it's about making sure that those resources, the beneficiaries, they do not face any stumbling block in accessing them. So this is what we're expecting when we are on the road to COP27. Right now, most countries, they've submitted their nationally determined contributions. We are now looking at implementing them. How are we going to implement the nationally determined contributions if from the beginning we are facing challenges in accessing climate finance? So we should start advocating for this. I mean, the protests that young people are doing, they are not bad. Let's channel that energy that young people have in the right direction, okay? From protest to proposals. It only makes sense because we'll protest, I don't know, the protests, they've been happening for the past 20 years. We cannot keep on protesting now. I mean, we now need to channel it in the right direction. Let's come up with the bankable proposals, and to the ministries, you need to be accountable. Make sure that us as young people, when we come, your doors are always open. I'm not supposed to be afraid to reach to your office. I'm not supposed to be afraid to pass my concerns to your office because I feel like you are the bigger person, I'm the older person, but together, if we are combined, we can come up with greater things. So your doors should always be open to us. If we knock, please, we are not even supposed to knock. Remove the doors, okay? Remove the doors. We are not even supposed to knock, okay? So this is our expectations. People are I mean, people, they would just say, okay, COP27 is happening in Africa and we're going to expect a lot of challenges because these are Africans. Let's prove them wrong because we have the numbers as young people. The huger population of Africa, they're young people. We have the energy, we are innovative. So let's take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could we have a round of applause, please? Yeah, before we go on to Brenda, I just want to say that Elizabeth Gulugulu is running to be the global South focal point of Yango, and Yango is the official youth body under UNFCCC. So I hope if you are under the age of 35, because those are just the legal terms there, I will let you know and you can vote for her and she'll represent us at COP27. From protest to proposals. So Brenda, I also have to just also ask you a question. And I know you presented the Global Youth Statement to Patricia Espinosa and a lot of other leaders. So what are some of the challenges you face as a change maker when trying to engage with African policymakers back in your home country? And because I feel like African youth often complain that it's easier to access foreign ambassadors in their own countries than their own ministers and executives and stuff like that. So I just really keen to hear about your reflections on that. You can use mine.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. So for me, I feel like there's so much that needs to be done. First of all, we need to build relationships that are beyond corporate relationships. We don't want our leaders to be approachable when they are, like, we meet them at COP. We also want them, like, when we're back home, we should be able to go to them, approach them. Because it's very easy to approach like an international ambassador than to meet our own leaders, which is something that, you know, if anything, every time we want to talk to our leaders, they should be open. They shouldn't see us as threats, because we are not threats. We're fighting the same battle, you know. Everyone is being, like, affected with climate change in one way or the other. And then we as youth, we're coming up with so many innovations that are there, just so that we can be able, like, should also be in the forefront in like tackling climate action, you know. So there are so many visions that different countries are coming up with. For example, like Malawi right now has launched Agenda 2063. And for that to happen, I mean, for that to happen needs the young people, the children, to be in the forefront so that we can be able to make that vision sustainable. If we have to have generational success, then it has to start with involving children and young people also to own the vision so that they can be able to keep that vision alive. So we don't want tokenistic approach. We want meaningful youth engagement. We don't want cherry picking of youth representatives. We want diverse engagement, you know. Everybody has to be there. We want to learn from you. How do we keep that vision alive? How do we make sure that the agendas that are being implemented, the commitments that you're making, they should be able to be fulfilled? So we're not there, like, we're not enemies. We're fighting the same battle. We're facing the same challenges, and we want to keep that dream alive. So if anything, we really want, like, some of the problems is the fact that our leaders are not approachable. As Elizabeth has already said, remove the doors. We're not there to fight with anybody. If anything, we want to learn from you. We want to be there, like, we are there. We're not going anywhere. Africa is our continent, and we want to create the better Africa, just like the way you want it to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for all that you do and all that you say. Before I pass back to John Paul, I just want to reiterate one point that Liz said about youth being involved in the implementation of all these submissions we are doing to the UNFCCC, be it the NDCs, the National Adaptation Plan, the long-term strategies. Because I don't know if you guys heard, but the states recently established something called the Climate Corps, which just means that you can put youth to work to address the externalities of climate change. They are there. And Kenya recently did something of that sort where our National Youth Council were trained to go address the locust invasion in some of our regions. So if that can be scaled across the continent, I just feel like that will be a good way to engage youth going forward. Thank you so much, and I'll pass back to my co-moderator, John.
Thank you so much. Amazing work, amazing panel, amazing engagement. Thank you guys all. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but this is the beginning of a new pathway for us as Africa, as a continent. We will have plenty of these conversations. We have seen that it's something that can be done, and we're very grateful for the time that our ministers have made for us. We really appreciate our partners, the youths, the engagement. Let's continue with it. I have seen we have prepared the youth position paper. We are working on declarations. Let's give them to them. They will listen to us as they have declared here in front of everyone. So I'd like to thank you, everyone, for taking your time, for coming. The youth here, let's remain united. The leaders, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Everyone, if you could just please.